don't know why, I'm just willingly walking into the belly of the beast. I've been just like cutting right through a lot of like the sketchiest parts of Portland, downtown speaking. Just willingly. I don't know, because I'm trying to get really far from here. I mean, I'm over by the Wells Fargo Center, Multnomah Hotel, John F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. I don't know if they both stayed here, but they both been here. You know, little piece of history while I'm trying to figure out how the hell to get to where the hell I want to be. Well, I mean, there's the Chinatown Gateway, so I mean, it doesn't help me, but I'm trying to bring you guys a new episode of historic murders from Portland. Only I don't know where the hell I'm going. Oh, I know where I'm going. I actually don't. I was planning on doing one video, and now I'm randomly remembering another one that I just recently discovered and took notes on, and I'm only like 3 blocks away. So I was planning on going this way or that way, but now I realize I should go this way because I can literally go to... This is one of those things. It's, you know, there's not one neighborhood in Portland, or probably any town, city, community, where there hasn't been some murder that happened at some point. So you look this way, you're like, oh, something happened there, that way, something happened there, something happened there, something happened back this way. It's almost insanity inducing. But anyway, trying to get towards, I want to say 6th Avenue, just north of Burnside. That's where I'm heading towards, and that's going to put me on the fringe of Chinatown. So I think seeing that gateway to Chinatown helped me remember that, figure out, oh my god, I'm trying to fall, trying to hurt myself. That is the objective right now, because this is actually it's not just a very Portland story for its time, but it's a very you know, turn of the century type story about crazy guys, and I don't know, it's kind of a meshing of good and evil, you know. I don't trust crossing at Burnside here. The street's too wide, there's too much that can go wrong. But I see exactly where I'm going for. And, oh, we got the Roseland Theater located right here. It's where the Starry Night murders happened. A guy who worked here disappeared. Pretty certain he got murdered inside this building. But that ain't a pre-1940 murder. But I'll do you one better, because pretty much across the street from the Roseland here, and I'm pretty sure this is the building because it existed at the time, but this green building here is where I want to be for today's story. So what's always complicated is most of these stories I do are pre-1930, and when it's a pre-1930 story, 1930 is the year that the addresses all changed in the city of Portland, and they kind of restructured how the city was. It was growing. And so pretty much all these addresses you find in newspapers for cases pre-1930, there's a big document they made that showed what those addresses are now. And of course, a lot of those addresses, when you find them, they point you to a general spot between two buildings, so you're not dead certain which one it was. And that's kind of the case here. The marker I found kind of puts you towards the edge, like right here on this building that goes all the way over here. And there was another hotel that once stood here that, according to the historical database I look at, was called the Fairmount Hotel, which is kind of confusing because there's a Fairmount Hotel further north, or I guess northwest of here. So the marker suggests it was this building, this big green one right here. And it's obviously had some alterations over the years. You can see the top up there. That's definitely not over 100 years old. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was this location was where the story happened. So all that info laid out for you, let's get into the story. We're still technically in Chinatown. The bulk of it is these blocks heading east towards the river. But for our sake, we're going back to Portland. Hashtag Portland. It's January 5th, 1909. And when I looked at the records, I think it said this building was built 1905 originally. So this building was here when this happened. And if this is the building, then this was a rooming house run by a man named Thomas, I'm going to say McJaillard. It's spelled McJaillard, but I noticed some newspaper reporters, because his name is spelled, it's a Mick and then G-A-I-L-L-A-R-D, but some people have put a J where the G is, so I'm guessing when they said his name it was like McJaillard or something. McJaillard. I'm just going to say it that way, even though it's really complicated and it's just a tongue twister. Because it seems to make sense, the fact that some newspapers spelled his name with a J there, like it had a J as opposed to a G sound. But whatever the case, he ran a rooming house here with his wife. And on the night of, I didn't even look before I crossed, on the night of January 5th, a couple of men came in. McJaillard was upstairs on the second or third floor, just kind of passing the time with his wife. They kind of both co-ran the place together. And they heard the bell downstairs, so they obviously had a couple of customers that wanted a room for the night or something. And Thomas, I'm going to call him Thomas because his last name is a nightmare. He goes downstairs and sees two guys there that are requesting a room. These two guys are named Osborne Edwards and his friend, who was actually his cousin. I don't know why I said friend. And he is only, in all reports, he's described as J. Caudill. J for his first name, James, John, Jack. Caudill, C-A-U-D-I-L-L. So we have a lot of problematic last names here. I'm just going to say Osborne Edwards' cousin at this point, because this is too much. So Edwards and his cousin show up, they want a room, and as Thomas McJaillard is leading them up to a room, I believe leading them up to a room on the third floor, they start asking him if there's any women in the hotel, because apparently some people that they'd encountered in the city led them to believe that this was one of those kind of establishments where you show up and girls just kind of show up in your room and you have a good time. And McJaillard's like, no, this isn't that kind of place. We run a classy establishment here. And so these guys start getting annoyed. They almost think that he's lying to them. Like, oh no, we were told that, you could get girls here. And Thomas McJaillard starting to get a little offended. Like, no, this is a place, this is just a rooming house that me and my wife run. It's a hotel. We don't do that kind of stuff. So things begin to escalate, and finally McJaillard, who is apparently a behemoth of a man, has had enough, and he says, I want you out of here. And he grabs both these guys and starts dragging them downstairs, essentially. And they're fighting him every step of the way, And, fighting, scrapping, arguing. And they get to the landing on the second floor, I believe, to head down to the first floor. And Osborne Edwards breaks free, pulls out a revolver, and fires. I believe he hits McJaillard only once, but it was a fatal shot. and he fell, and I think he was still trying to fight with them. And all the commotion that happened, there was actually another guy staying at the place that ran out and saw what had happened. And while Edwards is trying to get away, this guy grabbed him, and there's this description of him grabbing him on the landing going downstairs, and they're just wrestling with each other going downstairs to the first floor. Edwards apparently still has a gun, or maybe he drops it or he can't use it because for some reason he's not firing at this guy, and this guy eventually overpowers Edwards, which apparently him and his cousin showed up drunk out of their minds, which might explain their crazy behavior when they showed up here. And so he was held in place until authorities showed up, and his cousin, Caudle, I don't know, I don't freaking know, he tried taking off, and he was apprehended a couple blocks from here, and he'd actually been hit. The storyline seems that Edwards fired a couple shots, hit McJaillard and killed him, and then accidentally hit his cousin, I want to say in the arm or the shoulder. And so he actually was apprehended, you know, he's bleeding, and so they had to take him to the hospital before they take him to jail and hold him. But that's the official story of what happened at this rooming house run by Thomas Caudle. No, I'm mixing up the name. Thomas McJaillard and his wife. And of course, Edwards's explanation for things is, we were drunk out of our minds. We didn't know what we were doing. It was an accident. He started fighting with us and I was confused about, you know, a lot of murders in Portland back in the old days were blamed on the old, I had too much to drink, man. And I did have to go look back at my notes again, but yeah, McJaillard, even after being shot, he was shot in the chest, perforated his heart. He wasn't going to survive this, but he still fought and scrapped, and he held on to Edwards just long enough so that this other guy could come out of his hotel room and essentially take things over and fight with them going down the stairs. So this was a very common place in Portland back in these days. McJaillard's wife even said, you know, it was really hard to run a legitimate rooming house back then because it was just presumed that rooming houses, you know, had that kind of stuff going on. They said, try as they might, like every night there was guys showing up saying, hey, so I hear you got women here. And they'd have to keep constantly telling him, no, we're not that kind of place. And she'd even told her husband, because he was getting fed up with this. He was getting fed up with these roughneck, you know, sexist assholes. I mean, I know we didn't think about it that way back then, but he was getting sick of these guys coming in expecting women to be provided to him. And I think, you know, he probably took it to heart. Like, how dare you call this establishment that me and my wife worked very hard to run, how dare you treat it like it's just some kind of a whorehouse? And his wife told him, you know, in the times leading up to when he ended up getting shot here, she told him, you know, don't be so aggressive with these guys. Some of these guys are dangerous. I know you want to protect our good name and whatnot, but if you get too rough with these guys, one of them is going to do something. And that's exactly, tragically, what ended up happening. I mean, I certainly don't fault the guy for trying to maintain order under his own roof, but it seems had he just told the guys, no, I'm not giving you a room, get out, don't try, I'm not getting you a room, there's no women here, get out. There probably would have been some words exchanged, but odds are he would have probably escaped with his life, but he had to get physical with them, and that's how things ended up going astray. And in the end, Osborne Edwards did the best he could to try to explain the whole thing away as, hey, you know, I was too drunk and I got out of hand, you know, I didn't mean to do it. And he was brought up on first-degree murder charges, but when all was said and done, he ultimately ended up being able to plead down to manslaughter, which likely saved him from, you know, a death sentence. And essentially the prosecution, based on the circumstances surrounding the case, since this seemed to be a shooting that, regardless of what Osborne Edwards' background was, this appeared to be a shooting that was the result of a kind of a fracas breaking out. Maybe he felt like his life was being threatened, but more likely than not, he was just a hothead who was kind of drunk, who was like, I'm not going to let this guy mess with me or tell me what to do, and pulled out his gun and shot him. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, the prosecution did not feel like they couldn't prove premeditation. This wasn't a cold-blooded murder, and so you weren't likely to get a first-degree conviction out of that. And that's why, when all is said and done, they decided to let this guy just go down to manslaughter and let it go at that. What are you looking at? That guy was staring at me the whole time. It's an old iPhone on a selfie stick. It's not the fountain of youth. Anyway, you get that in Chinatown. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. I wish our Chinatown was that classy. So yeah, this guy got very lucky that he was able to plead down. And he got sentenced, because obviously it's not a murder charge anymore. He's not going to get life or hung. He ended up getting an 8-year prison sentence. Don't know if he served the whole thing or got released early or shot anybody else at some point in his life. Who's to say? This guy seemed to have had a bit of an itchy trigger finger, but whatever the case, 8 years for this really messed up thing. And I don't know. I don't know if I feel like that was enough time. Obviously the law was a lot different back then, but I mean, regardless of the fact that this wasn't premeditated, you can argue, this was a very hot-headed guy, a guy acting like a fool, a guy who, I mean, it was justified him getting roughed up a little bit. He was told to leave and he wouldn't do it. McJaillard was not in the wrong here. So I don't know if I feel like it was enough for, you know, what was lost, a human life, under those circumstances. But that is the history, that was the law at the time, that is what happened. In the case of Thomas McJaillard, murdered back in 1909 on the fringes of Chinatown, back there at 6th and Cooch Street. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention exactly where it was at. 6th and Cooch. And that's it. Another story, another historic Portland murder from way back. You know, it's almost 2020. Most of these cases are over 100 years old. I keep saying, no, this is over 100 years ago. So it's, you know, it's just another look back at another place in time, and you get another insight into the way some of these men of the city behave. That is just, they woke up, they went to work, and then they went out and partied, and if you didn't supply them the women to party with, they felt a carriage of injustice was made against them. I don't know these people. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching again. And remember, as always, like, share, subscribe, comment, but keep it nice. And all that said, till next time, guys, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian with another episode of Historic Murders of Portland.